That white light's a little weird, sorry. Hi, my name is Brila Gecko, and I'll be presenting on carnitine palmitoyltransferase type 1 deficiency, which is a metabolic disorder, or more specifically, a fatty acid oxidation disorder. Screen's a little weird. It won't let me go full screen without cutting out a bunch of stuff. So this fatty acid oxidation disorder is caused by either an absent or a non-functional enzyme. The enzyme in question is CPT1A enzyme. This enzyme is found in the liver, and it works to break down long fatty acid chains. So for the individuals that are lacking this enzyme or have a non-functional enzyme of this, they have problems breaking down fat and converting it into usable energy. So they don't have the right amount of energy in their body to do the work they need to maintain normality. So this disorder, CPT1A deficiency, is caused by mutations in the CPT1A gene, and that gene provides instructions for making the CPT1A enzyme, which then, again, if it's absent or non-functional, that's where all the problems occur. It's a rare disorder. There are less than 60 confirmed diagnoses. That a lot has to do with, it is rare in a way, but it's kind of hard to diagnose this disorder sometimes, as the symptoms may not appear until later. You may not know you have it. A lot of the times the symptoms only appear after times of heightened stress or times of fasting, at times in which your metabolic system is going to kind of deregulate and get messed up, but that you're going to see the symptoms of this disorder. However, it is theorized that it's more prevalent in the Hutterite and the Inuit populations in northern United States. A lot of this has to do with the diet and the environment, in that the individuals of this population may have more cases, but they're not having as many symptoms, or they may live their whole life without symptoms, but it is thought to be more prevalent in these populations. So with treatment, people with this disorder can live really healthy and normal lives. Again, you may not even know you have it, but treatment is typically needed for life. So it's not a one and done thing. You're going to need to continue the treatment. And the treatment a lot of the time has to do with diet and environment. So it's not necessarily like a medication issue. It's more of watching, what you're eating, because you're struggling, because your body is struggling to break down fatty acid chains. So the gene, as I spoke about, the gene that causes the mutations in this gene that then cause all the issues, is the CPT1A gene. It's a protein coding gene. The official gene symbol is CPT1A. It has 2,267 base pairs, and the codons that are involved are codons 66 to 2,333. So you're not using all the codons in the sequence, but those are the ones that are involved. So the mutations in this gene are the ones that cause the deficiency. Most of the mutations that you're going to have with this are going to be missense mutations, which simply means that it's going to cause a changed amino acid or a wrong amino acid to be coded into the protein to be incorporated. So you're getting the protein's not going to be functional, or it's not going to function in the same way because you're having this missense mutation in the gene. So the protein that the gene codes for is carnitine O palmitoyltransferase 1 liver isoform. So more on this protein. It consists of 756 amino acids, and it works in the catalyzation of the acyl group of long-chain fatty acids onto carnitine, and then that subsequent beta oxidation into the mitochondria. So all this means is that basically this catalyzation is really essential for the mitochondrial uptake of the long-chain fatty acids, so the thing that's going to give you energy. With the oxidation, the fats are broken down, converted into usable energy, so your body can do the work that it needs to do. This protein is also going to play a vital role in hepatic triglyceride metabolism. So there's a lot of metabolic kind of pathways and everything. So if this protein isn't working, if it's not functioning, if the amino acid got coded wrong, it's going to have a lot of consequences on your metabolic system and on your fatty acid uptake. So I've spoken a little bit about how the mutation affects it, but just kind of like a rundown of how it's going to affect the individual. It's going to severely reduce or even eliminate completely the activity of the enzyme. So if you have a lack of that enzyme activity, it's not going to be able, the carnitine is not going to be able to attach to long-chain fatty acids. The fatty acids aren't going to be taken up into mitochondria, and you're not going to get that energy that you need. So that reduced energy, the lack of energy, so that's caused by that lack of enzyme in the gene and all of that, it's what's going to lead to a lot of the symptoms. And I'll talk about those symptoms in just a second. But another thing that happens with the lack of enzyme activity and the lack of the fatty acids being broken down and being converted is that they can build up in the cells, which then can cause a lot of damage to your liver, your heart, and your brain. So big things. Now, as I said before, symptoms may not appear, but if they do, treatment's really, really important, because you're going to avoid, if you get treatment, you're going to avoid a lot of these really serious health issues. Okay, so some of the symptoms. And before I get into the symptoms, there's also, I want to talk a little bit about just like the lab findings that they're not a diagnosis, but they can indicate the presence of the disorder. So a lot of the times, if you're, pregnant and they're running tests on you and you see this is when moms or individuals are going to kind of want to go into maybe prenatal testing to figure out if the child is going to be afflicted by this disorder. So some of those abnormal lab findings are going to be increased liver enzymes, increased ammonia, and then carnitine in the blood. So if you have any of the, like on the lab, if you have these abnormal lab findings, again, not a diagnosis, but kind of just like an indication that something could be wrong and it could be something related to this disorder. So the symptoms, as I said, they tend to appear after heightened stress or periods of fasting. So if you live a really chill lifestyle, you don't fast anything, you may just never know you have it. But if you do experience heightened stress or periods of fasting, these are when these symptoms are going to probably appear. So you've got low blood glucose levels, you've got lack of ketone bodies in the urine, and then in a really extreme such situations, you've got sudden liver failure. That's not like typically the first symptom, but if it progresses, you can really experience just some really drastic conditions. So low blood sugar and low ketones, like if you put them together, one of the symptoms of this is just called hypoketic hypoglycemia, just like a term with it. Another symptom for people with this disorder, they tend to have larger livers, a lot of liver malfunctions, and then elevated carnitine, which is the same thing with the abnormal lab finding. Individuals also, again, without treatment, there's a lot of risk for liver failure, seizures, comas, nervous system damage, and sudden death. So there's like a lot of really dangerous situations if you're not getting the treatment that you need for this. Sorry. Okay, so this disorder is inherited in an autosomal recessive pattern, which basically means that the individual has to inherit 2 copies of the mutated gene from their parents to be afflicted and to show symptoms. So just when I was doing my projects and stuff to make things easier for me when I was doing Punnett squares, I made it B. So the uppercase B is the dominant normal allele, and then lowercase b is the recessive abnormal allele. So for afflicted individuals, their genotype is going to be homozygous recessive, and their phenotype will be afflicted and could be symptomatic. Again, you're thinking about all those situations. But the genotype of a carrier, so someone that is carrying the mutated gene but is not symptomatic, is going to be heterozygous, and their phenotype will be a carrier. And then the genotype of the unaffected individual will be homozygous dominant, and their phenotype will be unaffected or, like normal, not having the disorder or any symptoms. Okay, so the next slide has my pedigree that I did earlier this semester. So it's just an example of an autosomal recessive pattern or a family, that could be afflicted with CPT1A deficiency. I've written a few of the example couples on here and how their genotypes are going to affect the probability of whether or not their offspring will be carriers or afflicted or normal. I'm not going to read all that, but that's just a few of the couples on there. And then some logistics for the pedigree. So the affected individuals, the ones with the disorder, are going to be marked by red, and then the carriers will be blue. So here is the pedigree. So like I said, all these red ones are going to be the afflicted, and they're all going to be homozygous recessive, and then all the carriers, all the blue ones, will be heterozygous, and then all the non-shaded ones are going to be the homozygous dominant, so non-afflicted, and no ability to pass on the disorder to their offspring. So that is pedigree. So Genetic testing is available for this disorder. It's able to be done on a blood sample. It looks for changes in the gene that cause the condition, so it looks for those missense mutations, looking for the amino acids that are wrong. There's single gene testing and multi-gene panel options available, so you can test simply for the gene, or you can test for our similar genes as well. So for this disorder, a newborn screening is most common, but it can be confirmed through other tests as well. So if you're someone that have never experienced symptoms and you have a child and something happens, you can get tested. And there's a test called, it's a special enzyme test. So with the idea that the lack of enzyme activity causing the issues with everything, there's this test that measures your enzyme levels using a skin sample to see if you have the correct amount of levels, correct amount of activity. So the tests help to diagnose by locating two mutations, because again, it's autosomal recessive, so it's got to have the two mutated genes. So it diagnoses by looking for those. So testing is available. It's also optional. It's not mandatory. It's also not necessary for a diagnosis, but it can be helpful if you're looking for like a prenatal diagnosis, or if you're testing for carriers to see if you're a carrier or your children are carriers. So as I said, a newborn screening is most common. It's not offered in all states for this disorder. A newborn screening is mandatory in all states for certain disorders, but not for this specific one. So you can also look at private labs. Those also offer tests for this. Carrier testing is also available to other family members. So if you have if you have an afflicted child and you want to see if your other children are carriers, or if your siblings, something happens, you can get tested to see if you're a carrier. As a general rule of thumb, it's not recommended that people under 18 get carrier testing, but it's an option out there as well. Other testing options outside of a blood sample include amniocentesis. Ansel, I'm doing a presentation. I'm so sorry about that. That was my brother. There's other testing options available using amniocentesis or CVS. That's going to be more with, again, prenatal testing. So early detection is really important because early treatment is really important. So as I said before, with all of those really possible drastic consequences of liver failure, coma, seizures, death, all of that, if you're getting early treatment, it can prevent a lot of the serious health problems, and prevent other things like hypoglycemic episodes and any neurological injuries that may occur. So some concerns could be developmental delay, seizures, comas, and even death if you're not receiving the treatment that you need for this disorder. So my last thing, just some logistics of the testing. So typical cost of a newborn screening, and this is typically going to be one that doesn't test for the disorder because it's not super common, it's not really prevalent, but typical cost of a newborn screening is going to range from anywhere from $30 to $200. Most hospitals offer newborn screenings, and then private labs will also conduct genetic testing for this deficiency. As I said before, it's a rare disorder, it doesn't have a lot of diagnosed individuals, and symptoms may not appear until late or at all, but treatment can be really, really important in order to avoid those serious health concerns. The main thing is if you have a child that's afflicted, making sure that you're getting tested for siblings, for carriers, to see if you are a carrier or you're afflicted can really help and offer treatment that could potentially save your life. So that is all I have. These are all my references throughout the slides with all the information I found. Thank you very much. It's been a good, I guess not semester, but it's been a good term, and I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you. Goodbye.